All right, so Claude Opus 5 just hit number 1 out of 190 models on the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, and ChatGPT Terra has 0 published benchmarks to push back with. That's the situation we're actually in right now. And I think it's worth talking about honestly. So I'm running Claude Opus 5 against ChatGPT Terra across 4 real tests, because both models are being actively considered for production pipelines. Every Opus 5 score I show you traces to a named source, no vendor spin, and no guesses filled in for Terra. And honestly, what's wild about this comparison is that one of these 2 models has no pricing, no benchmarks, and no documented failure modes published anywhere. And that blank slate might actually matter more to your workflow than any score Opus 5 puts up. This comparison is for you. If you're routing real workloads through an API and you need to know which model to actually pay for, we're talking agentic coding pipelines, long document work, multi-step automation. Pick the wrong one, and you were either burning tokens on a verbose model or flying blind on a product with no published cost per million tokens. And both of those hurt your unit economics in a real way. Test 1 is long context document reasoning. And here's what actually goes wrong when a model fails at this. You feed it a 40-page legal contract, it confidently cites clause 7, and clause 7 says something completely different. You don't catch it, your client does, and context window size sounds like a spec sheet number until that moment, and then it's a very expensive mistake. Opus 5 ships with a 1 million token context window, and on the GDP Val AAV2 leaderboard, it scored an ELO of 1861 at extended effort, taking the top spot in the field. On ARC AGI3, it hit 30.6% relative human action efficiency, verified independently by the ARC Prize Foundation. ChatGPT Terra, no published context spec, no leaderboard entry, nothing to put on screen next to those numbers. So Terra takes test 1, and honestly not because it performed well, it takes it because there's no data to score. I was expecting at least some context window spec from OpenAI, and what actually happened is a complete blank. So the scoreboard moves to Terra 1 Opus 5.0, which feels pretty strange to say out loud. Test 2 is coding task completion, and the concrete failure here is your agentic pipeline stalls mid-task because the model can't resolve a real-world software issue without a human stepping in. Every stall costs you time and money, and at 89 cents per task on automation benchmarks, a model that passes half as many tasks is literally twice as expensive to run at the same output volume. What surprised me here was just how far Opus 5 pushed the coding numbers. SWE bench verified came in at 96.0%, the highest published figure on that benchmark right now. Frontier bench version 0.1 at max effort hit 43.3%, which more than doubled Opus 4.8's 18.7%. And OS World 2.0 landed at 70.57%. These are vendor corroborated by independent press, but Terra still has no coding benchmark published anywhere for comparison. ChatGPT Terra takes coding too, and again, same reason I was expecting OpenAI to have at least a sweet bench number out for Terra by now, and there's just nothing there. The scoreboard moves to Terra 2, Opus 5.0, which is a genuinely weird outcome when one model has the strongest coding numbers in the field and still can't get on the board. Test 3 is response refusal rate on edge case prompts, and the failure mode here is your multi-step agentic workflow hits step 4, the model refuses the next action, and the whole pipeline breaks. You don't get a partial result, you get nothing. And you've already paid for steps 1 through 3, so high refusal rates aren't a safety feature in that context, they're a reliability tax. On Frontier bench version 0.1, Opus 5 flagged just 5% of API calls at extended effort, compared to Fable 5 flagging 42% on the same benchmark, which is a really meaningful gap for pipeline reliability. Opus 5 also scored 2.3 on Anthropic's behavioral audit, the lowest they've recorded. The honest caveat, Opus 5's own system card admits it hallucinates slightly more than Opus 4.8, so lower refusals don't mean fewer errors. Now, before I call this one, I want to be real about what we're actually comparing. Opus 5's refusal data is solid and independently corroborated, but Terra has 0 published refusal figures, so we've got one model with documented behavior versus a blank cell. And Opus 5 does have ASL re-safety ceilings that'll block certain enterprise use cases entirely, which is a real constraint depending on your workflow. Terra picks up test 3 as well, and I'll be honest, I was expecting this to be the easiest win for Opus 5, given that 5% flagging rate. What actually happened is Terra's empty datasheet keeps winning by default. So the scoreboard sits at Terra 3, Opus 5.0, and that 5% refusal figure is genuinely strong, but you can't score a model that isn't there. Test 4 is cost versus output quality ratio, and the failure mode here is a production surprise. You deploy a model, it works great in testing, and then your build comes in and Opus 5 generated 100 million output tokens against a field median of 63 million. At $25 per million output tokens, that gap is roughly $925 extra per evaluation run, and that's the verbosity tax hitting you after you've already committed to the model. Opus 5 is priced at $5 input and $25 output per million tokens with a batch API option at $2.50 and $12.50 if you can wait, and it scored 61 out of 100 on the Intelligence Quality Index, ranking first among 190 models. Speed is the honest caveat. It clocks 52.6 tokens per second, which puts it at rank 117 out of 190. ChatGPT Terra has no verified pricing published anywhere, so there's nothing to put on the other side of this comparison. Terra closes out the scoreboard at 4-0, which is kind of a wild result when Opus 5 is literally ranked first in intelligence quality out of 190 models. I was expecting cost to be the one place Terra might have a real number to compete with, and instead there's still nothing verified. So every single point on that scoreboard came from an empty datasheet rather than a better result. Okay, so where Claude Opus 5 clearly wins, it's ranked first out of 190 models on the Intelligence Quality Index with a verified score of 61. SWE Bench verified at 96% and Frontier Bench at 43.3% are the strongest published coding numbers in the field right now. It costs exactly half of Fable 5 while beating it on agentic coding. And the 1 million token context window directly fixes the degradation problem that Opus 4.8 had at 200,000. Now, ChatGPT Terra does have a real argument. OpenAI has strong agentic infrastructure already in the field. So when Terra's benchmarks actually publish, that pedigree is going to matter. Zero published data also means zero documented failure modes. So early adopters testing it themselves are starting from a genuinely clean slate. And if Terra's pricing lands below $5 per million input tokens at release, the cost story could flip fast. Honestly, I was expecting this to be a tight call, and what I got was a comparison with only one side of the data filled in. So the decision rule is pretty clean right now. If you need documented performance, verified pricing, and the strongest coding and context numbers available today, Claude Opus 5 is the only choice with receipts. If you want to get your hands dirty on an unknown quantity and you're okay with no benchmark data until OpenAI publishes, ChatGPT Terra is worth watching.